Um, so I used to run an improv comedy training center in Toronto for 12 years. Performance company. I had about 80 company members performing on a regular basis, and we had students, a bunch of students, and we were trying to get a theater open in Chinatown in Toronto. It's Spadina, just north of Dundas. Great location, very close to U of T, fantastic streetcar access, and 2,600 square feet, and our rent was under $4,000 a month, so it was like really fantastic. But you know, as most things in life, sometimes things that are too good to be true are too good to be true. And when we brought the architect in to look at the space, he had to bring in a structural engineer, and the structural engineer said that we would not be able to get approved for assembly occupancy to convert the space into a theater and a bar, because it was a second-story space above some restaurants and a bakery and a jewelry store, and we wouldn't be approved for assembly occupancy unless we reinforced the joists in the entire floor, and that was going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $40,000. The landlord would not pay for it. He would only pay for $10,000 of the cost, and he also would not extend our lease term to help amortize the cost of the build-out over a longer period. So essentially, he also wasn't going to let us out of the lease, so I had to ride out the lease until a bank account went dry, and they reclaim the space. They take the space back, essentially, and that took like 4 or 5 months of waiting for them to basically repossess the space, because he wouldn't let us out of the lease, and we needed out of the space. So that was the only way to get it done. But when that happened, it was like, it felt like a very low point, but at the same time, I felt like it was the right time to move on and do something else. So I bought a lighting kit, which is the kit I still use to take headshots of the people in my company, to build up a headshot portfolio and hopefully advertise myself as a headshot photographer, because I had a lot of connections in the acting community in Toronto. So headshots was really where I started out in my transition. But when I shut the company down, I knew the writing was on the wall for a number of months. So like a couple of months before they had taken the space back, I had essentially stepped back from the company completely, for lack of a better term, to let it die gracefully, and had just started investing all of my time into building a portfolio and studying photography and shooting. So there was a quote from Abraham Lincoln that I stumbled upon that really inspired me when I started out to heading into photography, which is, if you give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend the first 4 sharpening my axe. And I knew that to be successful in photography, I had to do the same thing. I had to spend a lot of time just sharpening my axe and grinding away at the grindstone, and making sure that I knew what I was doing. So I'm a creative person by nature, so I find that I can't really work for anyone else. I can't do a 9-to-5 job. I just can't do it. Instead, I would rather work 7 a.m. till 12 a.m. for myself than 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. for someone else. I knew from my company the areas of business in which I was weak, such as contracts, negotiating, and accounting. And so when I was starting into photography, before I even started pitching myself out to clients or potential clients, I knew that the first thing I wanted to do was to make sure those weaknesses were not going to be weaknesses in my new business. So I took care of them and became very confident and very knowledgeable in pricing, in how to invoice for a commercial job, and rights usages, and in licensing, rights usages, things like that. So beyond that, once I felt confident in the business aspects, I also made sure my portfolio was really tight, which is funny because the portfolio that I had 2 years ago, or that I would have built finished building about a year and a half ago, I thought was solid, but now I would look at and probably throw everything out. I've got great support, relaunching into this new career, but it's tough. It's really tough, and you really got to hustle. And even with the hustle, I knew from talking to another friend of mine who's a photographer that it took him 5 years to transition from his previous business into being a photographer as well, full time. So I gave myself 6 months to build a portfolio, and then so it was like from May to November, June to November, somewhere in there. And then once November hit, I think it was middle of November, end of November, is when I sent out my first emailer. And I got a client right away, which was astonishing. That never happens. But I got an architectural client, shot a job, my first job, December 1st, December 1st, 2013, was my first job. And then I didn't have another job that month at all. Then once January came, I got fairly busy, and then, it sort of ebbed and flowed throughout the year. And last year was a real growth period, but it wasn't very, it wasn't awesome financially. But in terms of what I made last year, it was the same amount that I had lived off of every year for the previous 6 years running the company. But my stress level was next to non-existent, whereas before running the company, I have 80 performers to worry about, 100 students to worry about, things like that. It was just the stress level, trying to come up with $4,500 in rent every month, because there was the rent on the space, and then my own rent for my apartment in Toronto. So it was just, that was a real stressful. I think the first thing and the most important thing for anyone is to understand that it's got to be business first. You cannot put the photography first. And a lot of I'm not super happy with sort of the course that I've taken. There's sort of a fight. There's a struggle that you have to deal with, which is the direction that you want to go as an artist, and what the practical applications of what your client's needs are. You can't just be a pure artist and expect that your clients are just going to soak up what you want, because in order to get those clients, in order to be full-time, having people buy you as in your vision, you've got to be doing it for 5 years. So if you're just starting out, shoot whatever will pay you money that you feel confident doing. I wouldn't say do something don't shoot a wedding that if you've never second shot a wedding a dozen times or more, but do things where you can make money, shoot events, cover events, things like that, take some portraits, recognize where your slot in the market is. If you're just starting out, you're not going to be able to price yourself out super high, but for the stuff that you're really good at and the things that you feel that are who you are as a photographer, price that stuff higher. Because if you get if you're pitching a job and you pitch yourself out at $500 a day, and then that company hires you on at $500 a day, but you really want to be that $5,000 a day photographer, when that company comes around and gets to a point where they need a photographer who's at a higher level that costs $5,000 a day, they're never going to look at you as the $5,000 a day photographer. They're going to view you as the $500 a day photographer, someone who's like, a tenth of what that other photographer is and what they need. They won't even think of you as someone who can do that kind of work. So even though, I guess the caveat to that would be, make sure you turn down the right people as well. Make sure you're staying true to who you are and your vision as a business person and as a photographer, so that you're not going to shortchange yourself down the road, and so you're also not, fucking over the rest of the industry. To put it bluntly, like charging $120 for portraits and giving everyone unretouched images is just going to destroy the portrait industry. People want digital files. They think they want digital files to share on Facebook. You can give them that, but what people really want are memories, right? So I don't even shoot with consumers so that I can avoid all that. But I guess that was kind of mumbled. I guess what I'm saying is, if you want to be that $5,000 a day photographer, turn down, while you still need to shoot and make money, make sure you're turning down the people that you want to work for later on if they're not willing to pay that $5,000, right? So eventually they will view you, they want to view, you want them to view you as the photographer that they want to eventually be able to afford. I don't view myself as an artist. I think a lot of photographers would refer to themselves as artists, and I think a lot of photography coaches like to lump all photographers into this like pool of artists who don't like to focus on business things, so that they can sell their services to get people to focus on their strategies for business and like pay them for coaching. You can edit this belch out, eh? Yeah. So I think there's a lot of photographers who would refer to themselves as artists, but as a commercial photographer, my job is to solve problems. My greatest piece of advice for anyone studying photography, unless you're going to be a landscape photographer or a still life, but even maybe then like landscape and still life photographers, I think the best thing that a photographer could do is take improv classes. I think that's one of the best things anyone can do. But I remember the first editorial job I got, I scheduled it for an hour. The art director wanted 2 hours. She thought it would take 40 minutes just to get the subject warmed up. And I just said to her, I'm like, I need 5 minutes at the most, and then they'll be putty. Because I know my greatest strength as a photographer is my improv experience and my experience teaching improv and getting people to open up very quickly. So when I get a subject in front of me, I understand how to get on their level very quickly. I understand how they think very quickly. I feel that my experience in improv makes me an expert in human behavior, but I've also studied, micro expressions, subtle expressions, body language, and I incorporated a lot of that into my improv teachings. A big part of the improv for me, and sort of like my take on what improv is all about as a performer, is to seek understanding. And those are the two words that I would use a lot, which is like seek understanding. Your job out there is to seek understanding. You need to understand what someone is saying. So if someone starts a scene with you on stage and just says, "Are you ready?" You know, what are they, like, who are they? Why are they asking you if you're ready? What are you getting ready for? Like, what is the situation? What is the environment? Who is this person? What's your relationship to them? How do they feel about you? How do you feel about them? There's, from that, like, first statement, there's a whole bunch of questions that need to be answered, and your primary goal is to understand. And so when I get someone in front of me, and I've trained myself into this, like, position of every time I meet someone or talk to someone, I'm just trying to understand what they're saying. You know, what are they not saying? What they're not saying is more important than what they actually are saying. So when I had this first editorial shoot, I met the guy, just talked to him a bit. I had done my research on him. I knew he had just gotten married recently, so I talked to him about his wedding and just asked him a few questions. I got a sense that he had a good sense of humor, so I, you know, not telling jokes, but I made jokes, right? Like, you make fun of certain things, like certain situations, like maybe the situation of being on the cover, like, how are we going to make him look, you know? And you explain it to him in a way that sounds absolutely ridiculous, and you know he's not going to believe, so it at least breaks the ice, right? Like, you got to break the ice very quickly. And you know, after doing comedy for 15 years, I mean, it's getting close to 16 now, I'm always joking on set. I mean, I don't know, you probably have footage of people laughing on Wednesday, right? So it's a piece of advice you will hear over and over in the commercial world is, well, there's two pieces of advice in terms of, like, your work. It's better to be different than to be better, and it's better to be likable than to be great. So art directors want to work with people that they like and enjoy working with, even if your work isn't as great as the next photographer who's a total dick, right? So they want to work with people that they enjoy being around, right? Everybody wants to work with people they enjoy being around. Nobody wants to work with an asshole.
A friend, yeah.
Right.